Hi everybody. In this video we're going to go through and practice learning how to do Pythagorean Theorem. So when we go through this, please make sure you follow along and fill out your notes with me as I fill them out as well. So let's start by making this a little bit bigger. And the first thing we're going to learn about Pythagorean Theorem is I'm going to draw a diagram. Pythagorean Theorem is a way to find the lengths of a right triangle. Remember, a right triangle is a triangle that has 90 degrees. When we have a right triangle, there are 3 different sides. Each of these sides has a special name. The longest side, the side across from your 90-degree angle, that is known as your hypotenuse. I'm going to abbreviate that. I'm going to call it hype. That is known as your hypotenuse. That is the longest side. The other 2 sides are known as legs. Today, we're going to assign these hypotenuses and legs letters. The hypotenuse is always known as your C, while the legs are always known as A and B. So the most important thing to remember is that hypotenuse is known as your C. Our formula we're going to be able to use is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So we're going to take our legs, we'll square them and add them together, and it'll equal what our hypotenuse equals when it's squared. So let's just remember our hypotenuse is going to be the long side and the legs are the 2 short sides. And then right next to that, make sure you also put their letters. The hypotenuse, we want to make sure everyone knows, is our C. And our legs are always known as A, and they're known as B. And in definition, it is a way to find a missing sign. So it's a way to find a missing side of a right triangle. So if you need to pause the video here, feel free to make sure you get all this down. Let's go on ahead. All right, so some of the questions we're going to get are going to be asking us, is this a right triangle, yes or no? Can you check for us? Because sometimes we'll look at these problems like number 1, and we won't be able to tell if it's actually perfectly a right angle, like if this is really 90 degrees, or maybe it's just 89 degrees. So a lot of what we're going to be doing is testing where we have all 3 sides, and we're going to figure out if it actually is a right triangle. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is look at our problems and find our C. So the C is the first thing you always want to find. It is always the longest side across from your 90-degree angle. So the C is 25. And then A and B are interchangeable. So I'm going to call 10A. I'll call 24B. And now we'll have our formula. The formula is going to be A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And all we're going to do is take out those letters and replace them with the numbers. So in for A goes 10. So we'll have 10 squared plus in for B is 24. 24 squared, and it should equal, if this works out, whatever 25 squared is. So you want to make sure you have your calculator with you when you do these problems, because like you see, we're going to be squaring big numbers. So then I'm going to go and square everything. Well, 10 squared is just 100, plus 24 squared, so I'll type 24 times 24 into my calculator. I get 576. And if I do 25 squared, 25 times 25, I get 625. And I can already tell this is not going to work out because when I do this final step, 100 plus 576, I get 676. And 676 does not equal 625. So that would not work out. So because of this one, I would say no. This is not a right triangle. All right, because if it was a right triangle, those two should be equal. So pause your video, make sure you get that down. I'm going to go into our next problem. So we'll look at our next one. Here we have a 4, 6, 8 triangle. Here's the 90 degrees. If I draw an arrow straight across, this would be my C. And we'll go ahead and use our formula. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And we'll take out our letters. So my A I'll call 4 and my B will be 6. So this will become 4 squared plus 6 squared equals 8 squared. So if I did this, 4 times 4 is 16, plus 6 times 6 is 36, and it should equal 64. If I add these together, this is another example of it not working, because 36 plus 16 is 52. 52 does not equal 64. So this is another example of no, this is not a right triangle. It did not work out. Number 3, if we tried number 3 as well, that wouldn't work out. So I'm going to allow us to skip number 3. 3 also would not work. But it's going to be the same thing. What we're looking for is two sides that equal the same thing. And as we go down, we'll find some. So we're going to skip 3. And we're going to go to 4. What I want to show you on 4, oops, I don't scroll down too far, is they have given me 2 of the numbers, but I'm missing my hypotenuse. If we look at this problem, here's my 90 degrees. And if I look straight across to my C, this would be my C, and there's no number there. So I'm going to show you how we would do this. Now, I could call 8 and 6. Those are my A and B. It doesn't matter which one's which. I'll call this A, and I'll call this B. I'm going to write down my formula. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And when I plug it in, I'm going to get 8 squared plus 6 squared, and I still don't have a number for C, so I'm going to leave it as C squared. All right, now I'm going to simplify. 8 squared is 64, plus 6 squared is 36, and I haven't done anything with C squared, so I'll leave it alone. Next, I'll add together 64 plus 36, and I got 100. So I have 100 is equal to C squared. So right now, we're at a point where we're stuck. 100 equals C squared. Well, if you remember, this is an equation. We're trying to find the letter. So remember, when we solve an equation, we always have to do the opposite of whatever is happening to our variable. So our variable right here is getting squared. So you want to ask yourself, what is the opposite of squaring? Well, the opposite of squaring, the way to cancel out squaring is with a square root. So we're going to square root both sides. If you square root C squared, you just get C. If you square root 100, you get 10. So our final step, the really only new thing we're learning, is this last step, where to get rid of the exponent, we would have to square. And C ends up equaling 10 degrees. So make sure you have that down. That's probably the most important thing we're doing. Let's try to do one more like that before we show you how to find the missing legs. All right, I'm going to scroll down. All right, let's look at number 5. So for number 5, it's the same thing. They didn't draw me a picture, so I'm going to draw myself a picture. If I was you, I'd draw it as well. They have not given me C, so I'm going to leave C as is. A is 7, B is 5. So if I did this problem, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I'll go and I'll plug in my numbers. I'm going to call 7A, and so 7 squared plus B was 5, 5 squared, and C was C squared. 7 squared is 49. 5 squared is 25. And I still don't know what C squared is. Next, I'll add 49 plus 25. I get 74. All right, and my final step is to do a square root. Now, for this problem, I'm going to get a decimal. That's perfectly fine. I'll go and I'll square root both sides. If you do the square root of 74 in your calculator, you get a number that goes on forever. That's irrational. So we're going to round this to the nearest hundredth, which this would be 8.60, or just 8.6, you could say. All right, 2 more problems. The next one is a true or false, but it's a word problem we want to do. So they want to know if this number 6 would make a right triangle. So similar to the other ones we've done, but this one's a word problem. And they just want us to say true or false at the end, yes or no. But they haven't given us a picture, and they haven't told us which sides are which. All they said is the side lengths are 20, 21, and 29. So I'm going to draw myself a little picture. But one thing we have to remember, the hypotenuse is always the longest side. So the biggest number here is 29, so that's automatically my C. And then it doesn't matter what the other sides are. One will be A, and then the other one will be B. And we could solve this problem. If I did A squared plus B squared equals C squared, I'm going to go ahead and I'll have 21 squared plus 20 squared equals 29 squared. 21 squared, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to type it into a calculator. It is 441. 20 squared, oops, I should wrote equals, I should have wrote plus. 20 squared is 400. And 29 squared is 841. So I can see this is going to work out like I told you we'd see one before, because if I add these together, I also get 841. And then my answer came out as 841 equals 841. So you would say yes, or you would say true to this, because this worked out. Both sides equaled the same thing, as opposed to our earlier problems when both sides equal different numbers. So we're going to do one last problem. This final problem is going to be how to find a leg. This time they're giving us the hypotenuse and one of the legs. We're missing one of the other ones. So it says find the missing leg if you have a hypotenuse of 13 and a leg of 12. So we have a right triangle. They said the hypotenuse is 13, and they said one of the legs is 12. We don't know the other one. So it doesn't matter which one you call which. I'm going to call 12A, and this missing side we'll just call B, and 13 is obviously our hypotenuse, so that's C. We'll fill out the formula. 12 squared plus, we don't know what B is, so we'll say B squared equals 13 squared. Then we'll put our bar down and simplify everything. 12 squared is 144 plus B squared, I'm going to leave alone, and 13 squared is 169. So now we're at a point where, remember, we're solving an equation. So when we're solving an equation, remember, we always use SAD-MEG. And if you look in SAD-MEG, remember, the E stands for exponents. So I can't do that square rooting until last. So I need to actually do the subtraction and addition first. So I see that there's a positive 144. We would have to subtract that before we did anything. And if you did that, you'd be left with B squared equals, let me do 169 minus 144 in my calculator, and I got 25. And now we're at our final step, where you have B squared, and the only way to cancel it out is with a square root. And if you ended up doing that, you end up with your answer of B equals, and I think we all know what the square root of 25 is. It is just 5. So 5 would be your missing side. So that is going to be how we pretty much do everything for this unit. If you have any questions, please come talk to me. I hope you liked my video. Have a good day.